Hello and welcome to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. We're broadcasting out of WLBE, my 790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us on television, you're doing so on Lake Sumter TV, Comcast Channel 13, Spectrum 498, and CenturyLink Prism Channel 83. Today, I've invited Denise Burry, who is the president of Forward Paths Foundation, centered out of Leesburg. And we're going to get into the organization, why it's important, and how it's actually affecting Lake County. So Denise, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to visit with you today.
Well, again, I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about Forward Paths. What exactly is this for our listeners who may have never heard of the organization before?
Okay. We're an organization focused on at-risk youth and helping them become successful. We work with kids aging out of foster care and homeless unaccompanied youth, and it's our mission to help them expand their education and increase their job skills so that they can go on and live independently.
So is this a problem for Lake County? And when we say aging out, what exactly does that mean?
I think it's a problem that's growing throughout our communities in the United States. I became aware of it through working in the dependency system as a guardian ad litem. And most of the founding members worked with children in the dependency care system. And we got together and said, the state's not quite getting it done, and we felt like it was a problem for the community to address. That the only way it was going to be done right is if the community, the caring part of the community, came together and gave these youth more support. So we really believe that what makes a difference is the mentors and the people that are involved in these kids' life who take it personally that they become successful and that believe that the monetary impact on our community is worth this investment with the kids.
Okay, so what is the current process for these kids now? When they become 18, if they're in a foster home, they're just like removed, or what's the current process?
Well, we started Forward Paths in 2013, and at that time, you aged out at 18. So that meant that you became independent at 18. And it's hard because most people don't realize most 18-year-olds are still in high school. So on your 18th birthday, a lot of our placement is still in group homes. Then a kid becomes independent. They're on their own. And this is why they're still in high school. And a lot of kids in the dependency system or in foster care live in group homes, or they may be behind in their education because of the transition their family's been in, or the trauma that they've experienced. And then we see this a lot with our homeless unaccompanied youth too, so our focus is really on both groups. About 90% of the youth we work with currently have had a stint in foster care, so at some time in their life they were in foster care.
So they understand what the kids are going through.
Yeah, I think most people, once they start hearing about it, it's like, oh, it makes sense. They weren't aware of it. Even us as guardian ad litems, I was surprised. We had a DCF attorney join our board, and she came to us and said, if we're going to work with kids aging out, what about the homeless unaccompanied youth? So the count for the 2012-2013 school year were 323 homeless unaccompanied youth in Lake County.
Wow.
So these are documented cases of kids in school that are homeless and trying to complete their education. So that's not the kids that have already dropped out or not necessarily in foster care. And at the time, there were somewhere 35, 40 kids aging out every year. Since then, our numbers have went up. And
really,
and I haven't read a current date or data on how many homeless unaccompanied youth we have, but I think it's hard to count them for when we don't have the services for them. So And then they tend to lay low. It's that type of homelessness looks different than our chronic or veteran homelessness because these kids are couch surfing or doing things to survive that put them at risk. They're not necessarily sitting with a sign saying "feed me," although we have worked with several kids who are sleeping on the street and house a few of those now. But typically they're couch surfing. They're making relationships that most of society would not deem appropriate or that we want to encourage. So we're trying to give them an alternative, a safe place to be while they learn how to hold a job or stay in school and study and get caught up. So we're trying to help facilitate that.
So what kind of services do you provide for these youths, and how can they find out? Because sometimes the foster homes themselves may not know of all the different things.
Right.
I hope they do, but it depends on where they're getting their information.
Well, what we do depends on what the situation is. The first thing, we try to evaluate the situation, and I get on average one new call a day about some type of homeless situation. So if somebody comes to us and they're out of our spectrum, which is 16 to 23, then we try to do whatever we can to point them in the right direction of somewhere that might have some services to assist them. So we work with Mid-Florida Homeless and enter information into the HMIS system, which is the sharing system that puts that information out into the community that lets other services know that this person might need help. So we do that, and then we try when it is in our age group, that 16 to 23-year-old, we try to see, is there something that we can do to offer support that's not going to move them or relocate them, or is there just some kind of service that we can give them that will help their situation? And if not, and we find out they're in need of housing or need of protection, then we try to place them as soon as we can in some kind of housing situation. So we're currently working with Lake County Housing and Mid-Florida Homeless to do like the Housing First model, get them into their own apartment. We've had more success with our transitional program, and that's when we rent. We have a house and a couple apartments that we place kids in, and we've been more successful with that, keeping kids in small clusters where we can have hands on them more readily. We're interacting with them more. But we also provide food, educational assistance, working with Lake Tech and Lake Sumter when we can to get them in. And there's statute 1009.25 in the Florida legislation, and that states that these kids, if they're living in a transitional program or have aged out of foster care, that they get free education. So we're always advocating for these kinds of services and legislation to kind of support our youth. And then when not, we pay for them to get their education. So a lot of that's
when you say we, are you talking about the foundation?
I am talking about Forward Paths, yes. So through donations. So we things that aren't covered would be like the TABE test or the GED test. The GED test is 4 sections at $32 a piece, and sometimes I don't pass the first time.
Right.
So we work with the GED programs, and then we also have tutors. Transportation's another big issue other than housing. So we do a lot of.
There's so many moving parts.
Right.
And
right.
It's not just you're 18 now. You have to fend for yourself.
Right.
And like you were saying earlier, they may still be in school at that point.
Right.
Right. Where do they go? What do they do? I'm sure a lot of them drop out, but the whole ball of life.
Right.
Food.
Right.
Shelter.
Transportation, relationships. Loneliness is one of the biggest obstacles that we face. Even when we get a youth housed, they have a hard time being alone. And they have a hard time because they've had so many broken relationships and trusting people and making relationships.
Now, is there counseling available for that?
That's
or is it
number
more
one. If I had the magic wand, we've tried to apply for several large grants that would give us our own therapy program or whatever. But that's probably, other than housing and transportation, that's our next biggest need, is therapy to help these kids heal, have somebody to talk to, possibly sometimes some medication. But the kids come to us and they don't have clothing, they're behind in their education, they have no transportation. Typically, not many of them have mentors or solid adult figure to go to. They don't know how to access the things they need. A lot of times they don't have their identification. So when you said, what do we do? Just recently we sent 2 kids back home, and one was a bus ticket to Indiana, and she didn't have any identification, so we had to prove who she was and get her education. Then we had to prove who she was going to, so that we weren't supporting a situation that we didn't feel was safe. So we worked, and another one was a youth that had fled from an abuse situation in Orlando, and we worked with her and her family and communicated the situation, and then got her back home once we felt that situation was secure. So we don't always just automatically move them into a place, and it's like, wait, can we connect you to somebody that you feel safe with and somebody you're missing? The youth in Indiana kind of fled after her mother passed away, and she was in a grieving mode, and I think just wanted to get away, and followed a young man here, and then found herself alone. And then it's like, I want to go home to my grandfather. So we helped her return to her grandfather. So, it's a happy ending.
Well,
so,
I think that's the goal.
Right. It's like, how do we get these kids back to have a whole life as much as possible, or at least build on one? So strong foundation, and education and job skills play an important part in that.
And something else I'd like our listeners to understand is that just because they're in foster care, these kids, the circumstances are different for each individual.
Oh yeah, and
it
most
doesn't
of
mean
them
they've been arrested, by no means.
No, and some of them have, and that's always that's a hard one for me, because a lot of these kids, when they've faced abuse and situations, have not responded favorably. Sometimes they do have somewhat of a past that they're trying to get over, but it's, a lot of us, looking back at our younger days, maybe our performance wasn't stellar. So in a lot of it, when the stories of what they faced and the abuse that they suffered, a lot of it seems quite acceptable, and saying, hey, I might have responded the same way. And it's actually hard to get a kid into an educational situation when they have a past to overcome. So we work on that situation, but most of them don't have that, and are quite. They have a set of skills that makes them think, hey, yeah, this kid is worth investing in, and we want to see him be successful, and we need him on our side instead of the other side. We need them acting responsibly and making good decisions, because I think sometimes we drive them to use those survival skills that we don't want them to become too good at. So
right. Just because you're 18 doesn't make you an adult. Right. Legally.
Right.
With that magic number.
Right.
It does.
It always upsets me when a kid's having to recover from a petty theft charge or something when they were trying to survive.
Right. Well, Denise, we need to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll continue our conversation. We'll see you in a moment. Hi, and welcome back to Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we're having a discussion about Forward Paths Foundation with the president, Denise Burry. Again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I think this is outstanding information, and again, it's on the subject that most people have heard about, but may not realize just how it impacts local communities, the kids themselves. And the fact that you're 18, that's so profound. You're an adult. The state is almost done supporting you now.
Right.
For some, that's to me, I would imagine, be life-changing and a big deal. Now, before the break, we were talking about some of the housing that you provide, because I'm sure that's the first thing that comes through a youth that's being aged out. Where do I go?
Right.
Am I living under an umbrella? Do I have a home, a shelter? So that's got to be the number one.
Right.
What exactly do you provide?
Well, we provide housing for kids that don't have, let me back up a little bit. The state does have extended foster care now. In 2014, the state decided to extend foster care to 21. So the problem is we don't have enough extended foster care placements. And we've found that a lot of what happens with those kids in those placements is what happened to them while they were in foster care. So when a kid isn't successful in that program, and what they have to do to be in extended foster care is to work 80 hours a month or stay in school full time. But a lot of times when kids turn 18, like every other 18-year-old, and hey, I'm 18 and I can make my own decisions.
Right.
So they think, I'm going to go it alone. It's hard when they don't have extended foster care in the area where the kid may be in high school. So they're expecting the kid to relocate. And I've seen this when they're working on their GED program or in high school. And instead of being in Leesburg, they might have to go to Jacksonville or Titusville or somewhere else. And who wants to move when you're 18 and you have a boyfriend and girlfriend and friends at school or friends at work
sure.
or friends in the community? You're attending church or whatever, and you don't want to move. So we really try to keep kids in their local community. And most of our housing right now is in Leesburg, and we have a house with a house mom, and then we have a couple apartments.
So
and they're
you
grouped together.
have a home with a house mom who's
house mom. She's
making
young,
sure
and
no one's fighting, and
that's it. The last 3 o'clock in the morning calls for me.
Right,
and somebody,
right.
And that's designed. We have a youth that's still in high school. And I really don't think kids in high school should have to be on their own.
No.
So we've had to do it before, where we've had to place a youth in an apartment by herself, and it just really doesn't work. So we like to try to get away from that. So right now we have a house and we have run apartments. We have 4 apartments right now.
Now, let me interrupt. How many people, how many youths can you hold in the home and the apartment?
We don't. We do roommate situations quite a bit, and I think through the county and through our apartments, we have 20 youth and 6 little ones.
Wow.
So we work with our landlords, and it was really hard when we first started off because we don't have enough affordable housing in Lake County, and our landlords, they have an option of who they rent to and who they don't. So we really had to work to establish those relationships. And there's a few landlords now that we work with, and we've rented from them, and then we've worked with them, and when they worked with a student, to let that student take over the lease after our lease is done. So we've done that, and we just did that again last weekend. But again, we're trying to keep the kids close in proximity to each other, at least where there's another youth, so that they have somebody to talk to if they can't reach us, or just somebody to be friends with. So we're really working on that. But our dream is to have a tiny home community, and we are working on a couple locations, and I hope in a few weeks we'll have a more solid plan for that.
Now, so you're actively pursuing that as we speak, then?
We are, and it looks, it's been 5 years of us coming up with a plan, and it seems like our investors and those who support us really like that. We had an apartment where we had quite a few units, and the kids really liked that, and they said they'd like to go back to being together. But we actually have a location in Eustis and a location in Leesburg that we're working on, and we'll see that what the future holds. But we like the concept of the tiny homes. For one, the kids like to congregate. So a smaller area where they can have some privacy. We work with a very diverse group. So we don't have to worry so much who we're placing with who. We probably will do a couple of two bedrooms, but we're not trying to squeeze everybody into one house and having a lot of bedroom sharing. No, they're young adults. And we're trying, especially with our young women, they get scared being on their own. So it's kind of an introduction into living on your own, but knowing who is close to you. And then we will have like a house mom, an RA that lives close but not with them. So they have somebody to access if they get scared, or if there's concern, or if some of the fun needs to be squashed a little bit.
Right. Now, what age group are we looking at for the
It's
the
still
tiny homes?
that would be 18 to 23-year-olds.
Okay.
So
okay.
the youngest youth that we've ever worked to house was a 16-year-old, and she graduated early, and very independent young lady. But we had somebody call us with concern because she was going to move to Tampa and rent from a male and at a reduced rate, and the person was very, very concerned about this young lady's plan. So we worked with the Hillsborough State College to get her into student housing, and she will graduate with her AS this fall. So, and she
right.
just turned 19, and she's really been an inspiration to us. And not everything's gone smoothly. She decided to move out on her own and very quickly became homeless again, and we stepped back in, and she's stable now. And she works full time and she goes to school full time. So, like I said, she's really an inspiration to us. So we've been housing for a couple of years, so we're starting to see some real success stories.
How large is the foundation?
We have about 20 volunteers right now, and we only have one part-time employee, which is a case manager. And she's new with us. We had a part-time grant writer, but she's since went back to school, so we have a volunteer taking over her position. And we hope to have more staff one day, but right now we're really focused on making sure that every penny goes back into our youth. So we will be shifting to having more stable housing and having that clustered together, so we're looking forward to that. But step 2 will always be working with our landlords then to have these kids become independent and living on their own. And that's what we do now. When the youth then goes and gets an apartment by themselves, we give rental assistance. So we're not just cutting them off, hey, we house you, now we're not. Then we work, and that looks like about $200 a month and to help them meet their bills. And,
Okay, so another transition.
Right,
from,
and step.
Okay,
step
no,
further.
that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we're not expecting them to take one big giant leap, out into adulthood. Much like what parents do, we're gradually, weaning you off of our support. But we're there to come back to. And when you take a misstep and something doesn't go right, we're there to come back to. And we see that quite often, where we have to say, okay, let's regroup.
Well, you become the support.
Much like parents, surrogate parents. So and that's why the mentors really, really matter in this, and our volunteers. They're what makes the difference.
Now, if someone wanted to be a mentor,
Correct.
volunteer,
Right.
or volunteer for any of your events, which
Right.
we'll get into here
Right.
in a moment, where can they get this information?
You can go on, we have a Facebook page, Forward Paths Foundation. We have a website that's in the process of being updated, but we do, and there's a contact page there. Or you can call our office, or you can call my telephone, 352-408-2307, and we'll assist you with getting more information.
Okay.
So-
Now, I've got to ask, who's paying for this?
We run.
To me, it sounds like you're doing a lot.
Right. Yeah, we're not a
But-
government-funded agency.
but you're
No,
not,
yes,
right.
Yes, we run on private donations. We did receive a small grant from the county, so we do have their cooperation, their support. But the majority of our funds come from just your average donor, somebody that believes that we shouldn't have homeless youth in our community and feels like they're worth the investment. We also
Wow.
have some small family grants that it's always nice to receive the support from those. Those grants typically come with some openness. They want them directed towards education, or they want them directed towards housing. But then we just go out into the community, and the community's been generous with us. And we hope that when we go to do this building project, that this is something that they want to be part of. Everybody wants to belong to something bigger,
Right.
and something to feel like they have a purpose, and that they're assisting somebody less fortunate that really needs it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So getting the community involved it's
there is
critical.
no more important thing than having the community involved. So because it's really them that makes a difference.
Right.
And I saw a lady yesterday working with one of our youth, and the young lady has limited capabilities, but she's really fighting to make sure that this youth has every chance that she has and is matched up with the services that she qualifies for. And without her, the student wouldn't have the chance that she has, and it makes all the difference.
Right. And it sounds like your focus is one success story after another.
Right.
Keep making them.
It's individuals. Individuals matched with lesser, individuals that don't have as much, that need them, and it makes all the difference.
Now, do you work closely with other organizations that kind of do the same thing, or just, Walmart or?
We try. One of my favorite organizations to work with is Lake Cares, and it's Lake Cares is a food pantry in Mount Dora. So we do food day for our youth on the first and third Mondays of the month, and the youth come to our office. But we have a volunteer that's a volunteer for Lake Cares and for us, and she brings us a shipment of food, and then we distribute it to our youth. And our shelves are stocked, and so if a kid finds they need food, they ask us, and there it is.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Denise, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our show. This has been Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we'll see you next time.